I guess we're on. Hey, everybody. Happy New Year. It's another night of good nature here at Good Nature World Headquarters, but you'll notice the background is a little different. You know, what I was trying to get to happen here, and I guess it's not quite, there's the vision and then there's the reality. My vision was for you to see the really cool fog, and it looks like we're going to get a glare from the screen here. If I put you over here by the window, I actually was going to go out and sit on the porch tonight because it's that warm out on January 3rd. But I got so damp. There is so much humidity in the air, the fog. My keyboard was getting wet. I've already, gotten my wrist slapped a couple of times for having sand and dirt and fungi on my keyboard. So I didn't want to get in trouble for shorting things out with moisture. So came back in and I came over to my coworker Carina's office thinking that maybe her windows would show that fog. Well, we will make the best of it, as we always do. Thanks so much for tuning in tonight, folks. We've got lots of cool things. I'm not exactly sure where to start. Let's tell you what, let's do a little show and tell. Lichens. There are a lot of cool lichens in our area. We don't have as many lichens around here in suburbia, the suburban Chicago area, as you would see if you went, I know, gosh, out west. I remember in Glacier National Park, there were so many different kinds of lichens. Lichen diversity, I know there's a relationship between air quality and diversity of lichens. The cleaner the air, the more lichens you get. Lichens themselves, and there are actual lichenologists who spend their lives studying these really fascinating organisms. Let's see if I can get that to focus. That's maybe a little too close. We'll go back here. Lichens are a unique, they're their own group of organisms, but they are actually made up of several other types of things. We used to say that Alice algae took a liken to Freddy fungus because what we've got there is a relationship where a fungus provides the shelter, or kind of like the home, that the algae needs in order to survive, and the algae provides the food that the fungus needs to survive. Well, as it's been, as we learn more and more about how we can take things apart, look at them closer and closer, look at the genetic makeup. What we're discovering, or what lichenologists have discovered, is that lichens, there's more than one algae shacking up with that fungus. So it's not just Alice. There might be an Alicia, maybe an Alex. I've heard three different types of algae in with a fungus. And lichens can take lots of different shapes. There's these that are kind of crusty, they're called crustose lichens. There's fruticose, there's follicose. Those leafy ones are the follicose ones. To get down and dirty with the ID, that's a little beyond my level. We used to work with a lichen guy who, he would carry around with him, I think it was Drano. He needed very alkaline chemicals, and he needed acids. He carried bleach with him. His clothing was always all stained with, I guess, an absence of stains. It was spotted with white from the bleaches that he used, but depending on what colors these organisms turn once exposed to those chemicals can also help lead you down to an identification. I just brought it in because it was really pretty. And to the casual observer, it looked similar to this. You know, we see a lot of these things on the woodland floors this time of year, as long as it's not covered with snow, which they're not these days. But this that I'm holding in my hand, in my right hand, is this is a fungus. This is not a lichen. This is a toothed crust fungus. And gosh, I was hoping if I held it at just the right angle, you'd be able to see. It is very different from our friends over here, Freddie fungus and Alice algae. And let's see if I turn it just right. Is our camera going to let us see those teeth? There's tiny little teeth. This is one of our most common fungi that grows on dead wood. So you always see this on usually downed wood. It's laying on the floor of the woods that you're walking through, and there you can kind of see. But crusty fungus this has always kind of reminded me of like say pie crust that has been spread out, or like a flaky pastry dough that is spread out. But there were two things that caught my eye the other day. Wanted to share them with you and spur you to get out and explore them on your own as well. Very cool things out there. Let's go ahead and launch into, I've got a few slides to share tonight. And then I don't want to forget, I've got a couple of websites and a couple of PDFs too. So we're going to test the old screen sharing skills, or the lack of skills, as we pull those up here. Let's see what we got here. Let's start here with there. Let's go to the top of our album for this week. And we're going to go travel virtually to a place in Yorkville called the Hoover Forest Preserve. This is a former Boy Scout camp that's located west of Yorkville. Yorkville is there. The main drag is Route 47. That is not Main Street, however, that is Bridge Street. Main Street in Yorkville is the street west of Route 47. As you get past the main stores of downtown Yorkville, you can see the old courthouse up on the hill on the west side of 47. You'll come to a street light, a stoplight. It's called Fox. I think it's Fox Street. And you make a right. So you're heading, if you're heading south, you'll be make a right, you'll be heading west on Fox. And you'll pass some houses, you'll pass a couple of developments, and then you'll see the sign for Hoover on your right, which would be on the north side of Fox Street. Now, every year for, gosh, I don't know, as long as I can remember, I first found out about this tradition when I worked at the Fox Valley Park District, where I started there in 2000, and it had been going on for a long time before that. There is a New Year's Day hike that takes place in Kendall County. It's not always at Hoover. I know it's been at Lion Farm, which is a forest preserve on Kendall County Forest Preserve on Route 71. It's right next to the Richard Young Forest Preserve. And it's that Richard Young, same one we call Dick Young. The man has two forest preserves named after him. But anyway, this year, and I think the last one I went to was also out here at Hoover. Hoover is several hundred acres of, like I said, former Boy Scout camp that has been opened up for public use. There's lots of neat features there. There's a campground that you can make reservations, and you can go family campground that you can camp at. It's got flush toilets and showers too, which is kind of a rarity with our local camping options. It's right on the Fox River. There's an overlook. It's a great place to go and spot eagles and herons and all kinds of things like that. And then, of course, there's the walking trail. So anyway, getting back to this New Year's Day hike, one of the hike leaders for this year was going to be out of town, and he suggested me as a backup. So I thought it sounded like a lot of fun, but it also sounded like a great excuse to go out and preview the trails at Hoover prior to New Year's Day, so I kind of know where I was going, and to also take some beauty shots so that I could share them on Facebook and drum up some more support for this great program, which as we'll see in a few slides, it's not just a hike. They also, it's a kind of a charity event, and people bring cans of soup to donate to a local food pantry. So I met Miss Bonnie. We went out there last Wednesday to look around, and I had my cell phone handy so I could take lots of pictures. And when I got back home that night, I was going to post some on Facebook. And I started noticing that there was kind of a trend to the pictures that I'd taken. And I didn't really see any that I thought would entice people to come out and hike. But you know what? If we look more closely at these, I know you guys can handle this. What we've got here are some signs of some deer. This is deer scat. And what I've always heard is that when they're eating drier materials, they tend to form the beans like this. And when they're finding wetter materials, which they don't often get to do that in winter when everything's covered with snow. But right now there's so much, there's sedges, there's lots of green material for them to still feed on, that the scat can form these clumps like this. And then here we've got our token coyote scat. But look at how, this was a coyote who must have had a recent meal with a lot of meat and not much waste. A lot of times coyote scat, especially in the wintertime, you'll see lots of fur, which means they're eating whatever they can to fill their stomachs up, but they might not be getting a lot of nutrients. But this actually has a fair amount of other waste products going through it. It is, if we zoom in here, let's see if we can do that. There is a fair amount. You can see there is some fur. We've got our Dairy Queen swirl here that I kind of bumped when I was doing this glamour shot. But if we look at it with our handy 2 5/8 measurement guide here, the lip balm, this was a hefty deposit that was made there alongside of one of the trails. That was another interesting thing too. Coyotes typically, when they are putting down some scat, yes, they're relieving themselves, but they are also leaving signs or signals in the form of scents that other animals can pick up. And most coyotes, they will deposit right in the center of the trail. And this was off to the side. It's hard to tell in this photo because I zoomed in. But I don't know if this was an animal who's new to the area, or if it's less dominant amongst its peers. It seems to be of good size. This was, like I said, this was a good size deposit that we found there. But need to look at and to wonder upon, and to figure that it was probably put down within, I would say, 12 hours of when we were walking there. That's all pretty cool information. But again, not really suitable for saying, hey, come hike with us. There were lots of other things that Bonnie and I saw, lots of different trees. This was, I thought, a really great example of the warty bark of the hackberry tree. there's a fair amount of hackberries at Hoover. That's a tree that's pretty common amongst our woodlands in this area. But this one, when the field guides write about the warty bark, it's not always obvious, especially if the tree is older. But this one really showed off the ridges nicely that will form on that species of tree. And then we noticed that a lot of trees had these darkened spots, which I actually thought was some sort of moss. But then I started looking into it a little bit more. I'm going to click on the information here. So there's a group in Ohio that it's the, oh gosh, what was their name? It was something like the Ohio Moss and Lichen fanciers or something like that. People that get really into these kind of things. And again, I will say I am not that person to do the deep dive. I have a great appreciation for those people who do and can identify these things, but there's lots of different things to look at to identify different mosses and lichens. This though, they had a tree on their website that you could click on. Now this is not their website, this is my photo, but they had a trunk very similar to this. And when you click on the different things that were growing on the bark, it would light up. There was a circle that would come around it and it would give you the name, the species name. So they had trees that looked like this. And what it came up with was New York scalewort, which I put a little question mark there just because the details, I did not even, zooming in, I did not get a sharp enough focus on this to be able to see some of the details to identify this with 100% certainty. But the fact that this is what they described as extremely common throughout the Eastern United States, and the similarities of what this looked like compared to what they had, without comparing the fine little growth, the shape of the structures underneath it. I'm just kind of playing the odds that because this is so common, that's what this is. A New York scalewort. They actually called it, whoever puts that website together has a sense of humor. They wrote that Fralania eboricensis is so common, it's called Fralania eboricensis because it's everywhere. But it's not a moss, it's a liverwort. That species name comes from the Latin word for York, England. And it's a throwback to New York, which is where the species was first identified. But it looks pretty neat. If we go back here and look again, it first looks like a moss or some kind of a, in fact, some of the trees, they just look kind of dirty, like somebody had flung something like, dark coal dust or something against them. But when you look up close, you see it does have a definite structure to it. And this turns out it's a liverwort. So that was kind of a cool discovery. And then Bonnie and I puzzled over this. This was a young red oak tree. And it wasn't something specific to red oaks because we saw this effect on other trees nearby. It almost looked like it had been buried for a while. I mean, this looks like a water line, but we were pretty far away and pretty high up when we saw this. I don't think this could have happened from any kind of cooling of water. There was a slope there and everything. I don't think that these trees sat in water, but it was something cool to marvel at and wonder upon. And sometimes that's a great thing about nature. It keeps us all humble. There's no way that everybody or somebody could know everything about what's going on, but it did make us pause a little bit and try to figure out what might have happened there. Didn't come up with much, but it is a cool phenomenon, whatever it is. And then this was a little bit easier to decipher. So there's some rolling terrain at Hoover. You'll find as you get farther away from the river, the land does flatten out quite a bit, but there's some pretty neat glacial formations in the center of the property. And we can see that here. There's a rock that probably took a ride down here on a glacier. And this tree, is growing around it. Rocky terrain. In fact, the trail that we previewed on Wednesday, when it was time to do the actual New Year's hike on Sunday, I realized that what we previewed wasn't going to be possible because it was kind of steep, but it was really slippery because this was how much snow cover we had on Wednesday. By Sunday, it was all gone, and whatever had snow on it was now very wet, and a lot of that was mud. So we had to take a little different route on the day of the actual hike, but still was lots and lots of cool things that we went by and checked out like that, including this little creature here. It was warm enough out for bugs. Again, we're talking, so that day would have been December 28th, I believe. Insects were out and flying around, which of course our local birds were thrilled about. The midges probably weren't so excited that the birds were out and about feeding. But this, let's see if we can zoom in here. This is some sort of a winter flying midge. Now it lacks the fuzzy antenna, which I'm just kind of spitballing here, but when you see those clouds of little insects flying, they look like a bunch of mosquitoes. If you get some of them if you walk through them, and a lot of times what they're doing is they're flying in these balls. They're the males, and they are kind of relying on a group, the power of a group to sense the pheromones of a female. That's what they're using their feathery antennae for. And the females, they don't form those clouds, those mating clouds. They just kind of hang out in the mating, mating clouds of males will find these females that are scattered about singly or in smaller groups. So I'm going to guess that this was a female. There were a few of these. This was a metal structure. I think it was related to the lift station there for the sanitary sewer that's on the property. But yeah, there were several of these on December 28th, the time that we don't, usually, and what is usually, right? Things are changing quite a bit, but historically, well, I can't even say that because humans have only been here a few thousand years. I was just really surprised to see bugs. Could be a sign that we'll be seeing bugs on future December days, but it was worth taking a few photos of. Again, nothing really, worthy of a hike promotion, but cool anyway. And then there was this is not Scat, despite what it might look like. If we zoom in here, you might recognize it. I think that this is well, I know what it's a othika, or the egg case of a Chinese mantid, but I think it's one that was predated. I don't think this is one that is just left over from when the praying mantises, the little baby mantids, hatched out last summer. This one really looked like it had been chewed, pecked at, pulled apart. Those eggs inside there are protein, and when a bird is hungry, They're you're going to take whatever protein they can find, whether it's a non-native species like this or native spider egg sac. So so this was just laying the side that's opposite. It's not facing us. You could see the indent where it had been at one point attached to some sort of plant stem. But it was just laying on the ground in the snow. And I thought, well, that's interesting because so often we find these things in the winter attached to a plant stem, and it doesn't look like there's any interest in them. By contrast, the goldenrod galls that we see, those round balls that we see, on goldenrod stems, downy woodpeckers and chickadees, birds that will poke those open. They recognize that as a food source, and they will go in there and they will peck it open, and they will feed on those the fly larvae that are inside of those galls. But this was the first time I could recall seeing a praying mantis egg case that was used as a food source. So could be the sign of a trend to come. I hope it is, because we have an awful lot of Chinese mantids around. And if something could move in and control them at this stage, that would help. I was reading an article a few weeks ago on the debate as to whether the Chinese mantid is, a invasive species or not, and the conclusion was that, well, they do seem to have an edge in terms of their numbers. They are quite prolific, and they can eat, because of their large size, they can eat a lot of competitors, including other mantis species. But they other mantids, even our native Carolina mantis, is a generalist predator. It doesn't only eat bad bugs, it'll eat, so-called good bugs too. Jury's still out. I know there's some people who see them and get very excited. I know some people, actually one of our restoration ecologists here at the Park District, she sees them, she off with their heads because they are not native to this area. So anyway, maybe there are some creatures that are starting to eat Chinese mantids. We'll have to wait and see. We see more of these. Keep your eyes open this winter. If you find some of these laying on the ground, they look like they've been torn apart like this, I'd love to hear about it. Maybe we can do some citizen science. Okay, so that kind of ended the Wednesday trip to Hoover. I was going to put a placeholder card in here. This is no longer Hoover, because on Friday I went out, walked with some of the local nature nerds at Fabyan East Forest Preserve. And so there, Fabyan, local folks, you might be familiar with it. It's the former estate of Colonel and Nell Fabyan. And it's got the old Fabyan Villa, which there's tours that are run by a volunteer group called Preservation Partners. That's on the far west side on Route 31. And then there's some bridges that take you across the river. And then there's the east side of the river, and that's where the Fabyan windmill is. That at one time ground the grain that, in fact, Colonel Fabyan even had ovens installed at the windmill where he could have bread made from the freshly ground grains. Well, then there's the east part of Fabyan East, which is on the east side of Route 25. So it's the farthest east parcel of the Fabyan estate, and it's pretty cool over there. It doesn't have well, it's got a bridge, a concrete bridge that dates back to the Fabyan days, and maybe a few other little concrete structures, some pillars or posts, but it doesn't have, there's no houses or anything over there. There's just the broad kind of sloping terrain that goes down to a creek. And for a long time, before restoration really started going, and this side of Fabyan, the only way you could walk through it was to follow the trails that the mountain bikers made. And like that was the only place we used to see woodland wildflowers, because it was the only places that the honeysuckle was so thick through there that there wasn't much light reaching the woodland floor. But where those bicyclists went through, they opened things up a little bit, and you'd see wildflowers along these trails that were created by the bicyclists. Well, there has been a ton of restoration that has gone on there. I don't know how many literal tons of honeysuckle has been cut out of the preserve, but it's much more open. It's actually kind of easy to go off trail there and walk. That's how cleared out a lot of the woods are. Well, this was something that we noticed. It's a really popular woodpecker tree. You can see a couple of holes, but if we zoom in here, you're going to see a lot more. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, at least 6, possibly 7 or 8 or 9. I mean, this tree is so popular. There were even fresh wood chips on the ground around it. I don't know what makes it so attractive as opposed to some of the other trees in the area, but it was a really neat sight, and it made us all wonder, how many woodpeckers. Is it just one really industrious woodpecker? Are there several? Is this a condo? Do they have an HOA? Who knows? But kind of cool to see, especially someone like me who doesn't tend to look up. I tend to always be looking down, and seeing the little wood chips on the ground was a good reminder to look up to see where they came from. But always need to make a discovery like that. And then we came on the lichen log. I'm sorry, the fungus log. Look at all of these fungi. These are all variations on the turkey tail. I think there were some actual turkey tails. There's false turkey tails. There was a violet turkey tail, but so many. And we also were marveling at how they grew. Now, I don't know, this I believe was a down red oak tree. And red oaks, they grow, the bark has those lines or stripes. I learned it as ski tracks. Maybe there was something to that because of those grooves caused the fungi to grow in a similar sort of pattern. I don't know. Lots of mosses in between too, and yes, a few lichens as well. But it was just really a magnificent little find there. Actually, a pretty big find. It's a really big tree that was laying there. Gorgeous thing. And then now this was not at Fabyan. This was I paid a little social call to our friend Valerie. Some of you might remember Valerie. She used to be one of the instructors for the King County Certified Naturalist Program. She was also the manager over at Creek Bend. Well, she lives in her own oak woods, and I grabbed the opportunity because this is something that had been on my list for a long time, to get a picture of Virginia creeper in the winter. There's lots of vines that grow on trees in the woods, and some of these vines attach themselves with these external roots or rootlets. And the general advice is, if you don't know what it is, just leave it alone, because it might be this character here. These vines that grow with these really fine rootlets. This is poison ivy. And it can, it can grow for decades and get bigger and bigger and bigger, but it's got these really fine hair-like rootlets that help it attach to the tree. And the Virginia creeper, it attaches in a similar fashion, but a very different looking structure. They've got some heft to them, some dimension to them. And now I did have one person one time tell me it didn't matter to them whether it was Virginia creeper or poison ivy. They broke out no matter what. So they avoided all vines at all costs. But this I thought might be useful to know if you are in the woods, maybe you're doing some restoration work of your own and you're wondering, is this a poison ivy vine? Do I need to be careful? Just keep in mind that these thicker attaching structures here are the Virginia creeper, and then the hairy ones are the poison ivy. All right, we just got a couple more. This was the day of the New Year's hike. We had a great turnout because of the great weather. How often I remember some New Year's days where it was so, below zero temperature with a way below zero wind chill. But this was, it was pretty pleasant. Not quite as warm as today, but up there, I'd say at least in the 40s, maybe close to 50. The nice thing about this hike, as I mentioned before, is it's a charity for a local food pantry. So what we're looking at here is a big old kettle. People were asked to bring 4 cans of soup. That was kind of your ticket for admission to the hike. Well, they ended up 80 cans of soup went into this pot here, and I guess it's a Scout tradition. Everybody brings, and it doesn't matter. Nobody was told, you bring chicky nunu and you bring tomato and you bring cream of mushroom. Everybody just, they brought whatever they had. And you pour it all together, and it I know it sounds weird, but it ends up tasting really good. The hike organizers and also threw in several packages of hot dogs, or if you wanted, you could roast. There was another little fire nearby after the hike. You could roast a hot dog if you were hungry. But it's a tradition that's gone on for many decades. The total number of cans, it was over 400 cans of soup that were collected and donated to the food pantry. And then aside from that, those 80 cans that went into this pot here. So it was a good turnout, and a good collection to go to the food pantry there in Yorkville. We gathered there at the Eagle's Nest shelter, and then we set off. If you ever get a chance, if you're looking for a new place to tromp around, Hoover's they've got a lot to offer. There's a lot of things to see there, because it's pretty large. The chances of you running into big crowds, even on a day like this, there were well over 100 people there, and you could still look at a trail like this and not see anybody in front of you. There's chickapin oaks that grow there. Those are not seen everywhere. There's some ephemeral wetlands where the frogs call in the springtime. I'd imagine I'd like to get out there sometime too in the spring and see if there might be salamanders heading to those ephemeral ponds as well. But just keep it on your radar if you're looking for places to check out. This was a fairly recent sign. This was not too terribly far from those deer scats on Wednesday, although I took this photo on Sunday. Here's a deer rub. This is how bucks, whitetail bucks will communicate with each other and with the does. They have a gland up on their forehead, and by using the lower tines on the racks, they kind of scrape things up and they deposit that scent there, and serves as a little notice to the other deer in the area. Boy, bad with the clicks tonight. This is a building that's going to catch your eye should you go there. It's probably the largest structure on the property, and you might be surprised to learn that it's a swimming pool. This dates back to the Scout days. Now you can see it's not a functional swimming pool. And Kim, I don't know if you're on tonight, but there's been a lot of talk about what are we going to do with this. It's a wooden building that housed water. Now I know from experience when I worked at the Fox Valley Park District, we at Blackberry Farm, which is one of the more popular destinations in the Fox Valley Park District. There used to be a building there called Sensory Garden, and it was kind of a similar structure to this, high roof, open rafters inside. And it was turned into a greenhouse because it had some windows. Well, a greenhouse, or having lots and lots of tropical plants in a wooden structure over time, it's going to have the same effect that the swimming pool did. It's going to produce lots of mold, lots of mildew. I don't know, what the future is of this building, but it is kind of a cool, and it sounds like it was, quite the place to be at one time. There were, I guess there were heaters or warming lights, kind of like miniature sauna lights in these alcoves here where you could go and warm up after you got out of the pool. But it does dominate the first part of as you head out towards the walking trails. And in case you're curious to see what's inside, that's what it is. All right, I think that ends that part of the slideshow. So I'm gonna stop this share. And I think we had some chats, got several chats here. Thank you, Kim. Violet tooth polypore. Looks like we had some tech support going on. Thank you at the first few chats there. Violet tooth polypore. Yes, that was one of the turkey tail like fungi that were growing on that big log at Fabyan. In Girl Scouts, we called it friendship soup. Okay, all I could think of was stone soup, but that was that story about the guy with the stones in the water, and then he kept saying, well, this would be really good if you just, bring me some carrots or bring me some potatoes. But friendship soup, I like that. Thank you, Sarah. And then Kay mentioned the Fabyan East preserves wood, the very large holes in the trees possibly be created by pileated woodpeckers versus some of the other woodpecker species. In that case, Kay, the holes in that particular woodpecker tree were not quite the right size or shape for a pileated, but I do remember a few years ago seeing a pileated, not excavating. I take that back. I didn't see the actual woodpecker, but I saw its excavation. As they're looking for food, they make these big rectangular holes. So I don't think anything at Fabyan was a pileated, but at Hoover, from what I understand, pileateds are fairly frequently seen there, and they've nested there in years past. So a pileated nest hole, let's see, it would probably be, here's it would probably be about like that. And the holes that were in the tree at Fabyan were more like this.
Okay, yeah, they are large holes.
So yeah, I'm thinking they were probably downy, maybe
Okay,
red belly. Those seem to be the two that we were seeing around that day.
nice, thanks.
Yeah, oh sure, Kay. Skateboarders in the swimming pool, that's a good idea to repurpose it. Maybe do a little mold remediation. I like that, Ann. And maybe you and Ralph could be the first ones that test it out, huh? Oh wait, no, that song is called Wipeout. Never mind. But yeah, no, that's a cool idea. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's up to the Forest Preserve folks down there what they decide to do with it. But it is by far the biggest building on the property. Oh no. Let's see. Now I've got there's a couple things you probably maybe you saw in the news. I believe it was on New Year's Day up at Waukegan Harbor. There were some birders who noticed a young immature bald eagle that seemed to be having some trouble. It was just kind of sitting on this piece of ice that was floating in Lake Michigan. So the Chicago Bird Collision Monitors were called, and they performed a rescue. It was pretty cool. A guy came in on a kayak, and instead of like trying to catch the bird from the kayak, he just kind of nosed the ice that the bird was on it. And he said afterward, he said, you could tell there was really something wrong with this bird, because, a normal bird of any kind, an eagle, a duck, whatever, is not going to let somebody get that close. And then he nosed the ice towards the pier. And again, the bird didn't struggle or anything. Well, over on the pier, there was some other bird collision monitor volunteers who had a big net, and they scooped the bird up and took it to Willowbrook Wildlife. The thinking is that it might have ingested some rodent poisoning through, maybe it ate a rat or a mouse that had consumed rodent bait. And, you eat enough of those things, it builds up in the bird system, and it can cause there's anticoagulants in those baits that then can have a cumulative effect on the animal that's eating them. Well, the reason I bring that up is so today I did a talk for the folks in the Geneva Garden Club, and as I was heading over to that program, I passed a goose on the side of Peck Road. And it's we see geese everywhere, so seeing a Canada goose isn't that unusual, except this one was all by itself, and it was right by the road, and it was just kind of sitting there. It didn't look real happy. And I was a little torn because I needed to get to the program, but I thought, well, maybe, if it's still there when the program's over, I'll see if there's somebody we can call, like maybe the Chicago Bird Collision Monitors. Well, I didn't have to do anything, because I would say 30 feet away, there were two people. One of them had a big net, and they were clearly plotting a strategy to try and capture this bird and get it some help. That's all to say that I thought it might be helpful for you all to have the Chicago Bird Collision Monitors information handy, should you find a bird that needs some help. They are well connected with, so sometimes people will call and they're asking for the number of, say, Anderson Humane, that now does wildlife. They've absorbed Fox Valley Wildlife, or CARE up in Valley View, or Willowbrook, whatever. The Bird Collision Monitors work with all of these rescue groups, and these people are very skilled at getting birds, like an eagle. Who would have the guts to go after an eagle, no matter how sick it was? That's still a big bird with a big bill and strong talons. Here's their website, birdmonitors.net. If you go there, and they've got instruction. If you found a baby bird, they walk you through what you should do. But found an injured bird, if you click on that, this gives you their phone number. Says no one will check or respond to an email or a text. To report an injured bird, call. And there it is, 773-988-1867. I have this plugged into my phone. I also have it written down by my desk in case I've misplaced my phone, which I sometimes do. But it's a great group, and it's a handy number to have. All sorts of great information And here you can see, as you look at the menu down the side, they talk about keeping the lights out during migration. Well, actually, keep your lights on or off a lot in the, just to reduce light pollution. It's a good idea to keep the lights out. But they talk about, how devastating it can be to birds who migrate at night to have lights on, especially, in tall buildings in large cities like Chicago. They've worked with a lot of building owners in Chicago to get those lights turned down. So it's a great group. Thought you all might like to see and have that number handy. Oh, the other thing I was going to give you a heads up on, now this isn't going to be starting yet until we get into March, but we are bringing back the Kane County Spring Ephemerals project. This is something that last year it was just sites within St. Charles. No, I'm sorry. 2 years ago, it was just sites within St. Charles. It was something we did to engage people as we're coming out of the pandemic. We thought it might be neat to get people out to just use the iNaturalist app to take pictures and report the spring flowers that they were seeing. And we did get a lot of native woodland wildflowers. We also got a lot of crocus and daffodils and things like that. But it was just neat to see how many people, we were able to engage. Well, last year we made it countywide, and we had partners like Greater Kane Wild Ones, thank you, Kim. And we had the Batavia Wildflower Sanctuary, thank you, Sarah. We had Red Oak Nature Center. We had Leroy Oaks and the Forest Preserve District. We had the Campton Township open space locations. We had Dundee Township open space. We had a lot of places that were contributing information and putting signs out. We made up little information signs that land managers could put out at their locations to encourage people to do like a census. And over time, whenever we do a monitoring project like this, whether it's spring ephemerals or frogs or whatever it is, these are snapshots which over time give us trends. So the real value becomes apparent, as we move ahead with this project. If we're lucky enough to be able to gather, say, 20 or 30 years of data, we'll probably see some trends emerge in terms of the dates that these different species are blooming. Are they going to start blooming sooner because the climate is getting warmer? Are they going, what's going to happen? And that can be revealed through the trends that come about from projects like this. So this was last year. We had 2,102 observations of 448 species, 229 identifiers, that people that work to identify them, 254 actual people observing. And some of you might recognize Hazelnut Man there, our friend Jack. But this is how the behind the scenes of iNaturalist, the project organizers break the data down. You can see that about 2/3 of the observations were identified to the point where they could be considered research grade. About 1/3 of them were a little hinky and maybe need some confirmation, but still, it's a great way to get people out, and it's a great way to learn about your properties. Doesn't have to be within a public land, although we do have lots of public land partners that are with us again. We do have the project up. We haven't added a pretty picture yet, but we will be doing it again this year, and I'd like to encourage you all to check it out. Kane County, Illinois Spring 2023 Ephemerals Project. We'll be collecting data I love this countdown. In 56 days, 3 hours, almost exactly 3 hours. That must be we're getting close to 9 o'clock. I better speed this up. Anyway, if you've got questions about it, let me know. I might promote this again as we get closer to our start date in March. All right, so that was it from there. From that, there was two other things I'm going to share here. We're having a work day at Langum Woods. This is the City of St. Charles Natural Resources Commission. Langum is an interesting little, it's just a couple of acres of woods that are right next to the Public Works facility over on Riverside and Devereaux. It's again, if you're local, you might know there's a lot of work going on, not in the woods, but right in front of the woods. Our city is moving, Public Works is moving the lift station for the water treatment plant. Right now, that is right on the river, and that's been determined to be in a area prone to floods. So they're moving that lift station across to the east side of Route 25. It's not affecting anything in the woods. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to get in there on Saturday, January 21st, 1 to 3 p.m. And we're going to be going after the usual suspects. There's a little bit of honeysuckle in there, a little bit of buckthorn, but then there's also a lot of young black cherries, which even though it's a native species, it can spread rather aggressively. So if you are interested in helping out in that endeavor, let me know. We need to kind of have an idea ahead of time of how many people will be there so we can make sure we have enough treats, enough gloves, enough eye protection for everybody. But Pato at stcparks.org if you'd like to join us for that. And then just briefly here, this last thing, this popped up in my email over the weekend, and I thought it sounded like fun. It's the same day though, so I'm not sure that I can make it, but you know, if you opt to not come to the work day, you might want to take a drive west. This is the apparently 19th annual. This is the first year I'd heard of it, but the 19th annual Golden Eagle Survey. Now, golden eagles are considered extremely rare in Illinois. Not that you know, they're highly endangered, but this just isn't a part of their natural range. But they do move around in the wintertime. I do try and get a handle on those movements. There is this annual survey. So if you're interested in this, you have to attend or dial into, because these are all virtual trainings, just one of these trainings. You don't have to do all three, but there's on the 8th, the 10th, and the 16th of January, there are instructions that you would receive. But if you're interested in this, this is just a PDF that showed up in my email inbox, and I would be glad to send it to you. Just reply to the email invite that we sent out for tonight's program, and I'd be glad to send this out to you. And with that, I'm going to stop this share, and we'll go back again. That's what we had. But the hour of some good nature news for our good new year. Hope you all celebrated, you know, had some fun maybe in a safe, of course, manner. And I hope you're looking forward to a great 2023. So glad everybody's able to join tonight. Appreciate your time, and I'll look forward to seeing you all back next week. Same time. Probably not the same place. This didn't work out quite as well as I thought, but be safe, be well, take care.
Thank you, Pam. Thanks. Good night.
Buddy.
Thanks, Pam.
Thanks, Pam.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Pam.
Thanks,
Good night, Pam.
Night, night.